Good evening and welcome to Plant Your Seed. Today we're going to discuss one of the more common questions when it comes to personal money management. If I spend all the money that I make on a monthly basis on necessities, how can I save? I pay for electricity, for rent, for transport and for food. I spend no money on luxuries whatsoever. If that is true, how can I save without sacrificing some necessity of life? Wouldn't saving then be impossible if I don't make a certain amount of money more than my needs? A very valid question, and today we'll attempt to address it. Now, the answer to this question is philosophical in nature, because we need to challenge our thinking on what savings truly is. Most of us plan to save when we're done spending on our needs every month. And this is the wrong way to save. We need to save before we spend. Our very first item to pay for should be putting our money into a savings account before spending on anything else. Saving is the foundation, it's the basis of all financial growth. Storing up your seed for the purposes of planting them is fundamental to growing your wealth. Therefore, the question isn't really, can I afford to save? But, can I afford not to? The direct answer to this question is that we need to save before we spend, not spend our money on our needs and then save what's left over at the end of the month. We need to evaluate our spending so that we can start to reduce or eliminate certain unnecessary expenses in order for us to save consistently and also spend on our necessary expenses. Therefore, evaluating our spending habits is key to managing our money. Our wants and our desires will always exceed our incomes. This is an unfortunate reality of life. And therefore, when we evaluate our spending, we begin to reduce or eliminate certain temporary desires and replacing those desires with a desire to invest in your future, like purchasing a home to live in and putting together a strong retirement account that will pay you when you're no longer working.
With 3 weekly flights to Gatwick Airport, Rwandair flies you to London, one of the world's leading financial centers. Book now and explore the world on board our young and state-of-the-art fleet. Call 250-788-177000 or email reservations@rwandair.com.
fly the dream of Africa.
And earlier, we're going to look at a story out of his book, The Richest Man in Babylon. George S. Clason writes about the story of Arcad. Arcad was, in this story, the wealthiest man in Babylon who gets called into the court of the king by the king himself. And the king has a couple of questions for Arcad, who is known as the wealthiest man in Babylon. And the king asks Arcad a couple of questions, but ultimately what the king wants to know is, how did Arcad grow the wealth that he has? He's become so amazingly wealthy in what was at the time the world's wealthiest nation. But the king is unaware how Arcad was able to grow the wealth that he's been able to amass, and asks Arcad if he can teach the things that he did to other people, if this wealth building skill can be taught to other people. Now Arcad, who is a humble servant of the king, tells the king that he indeed can teach other people how to grow wealth, and he would be happy to serve the king in this way. Now what the king does is select a group of 100 men whom Arcad will teach. And the king says once they are taught and they live out the lessons that Arcad has taught them, these 100 men will be responsible for teaching others, who will in turn be responsible for teaching even more. One day in class, after one of the 100 men who Arcad is teaching asks a very, very important question, the same question we're asking ourselves today, a student puts up his hand and says to the teacher, how is it that I might be able to save 10% of my income when I have no money left after all my necessary expenses are paid for during the month? And this was a question that echoed throughout the room because all of the other students had the same concern. And so Arcad asks a very interesting question himself to address this problem. And he says to the class, how many of you have thin wallets? How many of you are broke? And in an outburst of laughter, everyone in the room puts up their hand, and they also begin to raise their purses and shake them, showing how little money is left. And then Arcad continues with another very interesting question. He asks, how is it that in a room of 100 men, each having different size of family, different expenses, different incomes, how is it that each one of you are broke at the end of the month, and yet you all make different amounts of money and you have different spending and needs? And the class went still. And what Arcad continues to say is that what each of us call necessary expenses will always grow to match our incomes unless we actively refuse to let it be so. Do not confuse necessary expenses with desires. Each of us and our families possess many more desires than our money can satisfy. Therefore, even when we use our money to satisfy our desires, when the money finishes, we still have desires left unsatisfied. All people are burdened with having more desires than their money can satisfy. Even the richest man in Babylon cannot satisfy all his desires, even though he has so much wealth. There are limits to his time. There are limits to his strength. There are limits to how far he can travel and what he can eat. Just as weeds grow on a farm, anywhere the farmer leaves space for their roots, so will desires spring up as long as there is a possibility of satisfying them. Our desires are endless, but those we can satisfy are only a few. Let us study our spending habits, identify certain expenses that can be wisely reduced or eliminated altogether in order for us to afford the funds we absolutely need to save in order to grow our wealth.
3 weekly flights to Gatwick Airport. Rwandair flies you to London, one of the world's leading financial centers. Book now and explore the world on board our young and state-of-the-art fleet. Call 250-788-177000 or email reservations@rwandair.com.
Rwandair, fly the dream of Africa.
It's very important for us to understand this, because when we start to control our spending and begin to appreciate the difference between things that we need, truly need, and things that we want, then we can start paying for our needs, entertaining some of our wants, but most importantly, putting money away to build our financial future, with some of the money that we were spending on the things that we want but do not need. According to George S. Clason, the danger that we might find ourselves in if we don't control our spending and evaluate how we spend is that as long as there is money available to us in checking accounts, in credit, and in cash, our wants and our desires will always find things to spend this available money on, regardless of how much money we actually have. And we will always spend more than what we do have. This again will produce a cycle of debt. Therefore, it's very important for us to take away these few things. Everyone is able to save. As long as they make an income or an increase of any kind, you can save a portion of it if you understand the value of saving, if you know what your saving is going to be used for, and how to control your expenses in order for you to maintain a predictable and a consistent savings. Thank you for watching. Join us next week where we will continue to discuss how you can grow your own wealth. Remember, the answer is only the answer. Financial success is living the answer every single day.